Welcome to TYT Sports. That's Francis. I am Jason. Francis, Jarryd Hayne.
Interesting.
National Rugby League player turned potential starting NFL player, National Football League. Truly a great crossover to see, and we've done a clip on Jarryd Hayne in the past, and back in March when he signed as an unrestricted free agent with the San Francisco 49ers. A lot of speculation, can this guy make the transition? We haven't really seen it before, but we have a lot of different elements to get to for that reason. One, I want to start with his emotional attachment to the game of rugby, in which he announced that he would be retiring and then going to play for the NFL. So let's first have a look at his press conference back in March.
I think I'm excited more than anything, speaking to Inu today. We spoke about how we're two kids from Minto that had a dream. We both had a dream to play in the NRL together, and we've done that, and everything else has been a bonus.
And that's basically the gist of the 3-minute press conference, is him thanking his teammates, having that dream to play in the NRL, and he was extremely successful in the National Rugby League. The Daily M Medal, which is essentially the MVP of the National Rugby League, 2009 and 2014. His highlight tape, phenomenal. And what I want to highlight about that highlight tape.
Interesting.
Right? You see what I'm doing here? Is his ability to not just run the football or run the rugby ball, the rugby egg.
If you're not going to call it hand egg, you don't get to call it
What's
rugby
the
egg.
rugby ball called?
It's just a ball.
The ball.
Yeah.
The rugby egg. So his ability to run the football is very similar, I see at least, and I'm not saying that he's going to be Adrian Peterson. That's an insane prediction to make, but he runs with a similar stand-up mentality. And it's
high knees and like straight back.
High knees, straight back, and his stiff arm. So first, let's take a look at this highlight real quick of him in the NRL.
Not much pressure on Jarryd Hayne. He takes it comfortably. Steps one, steps two, steps three. He's away. Jarryd Hayne with a catch and a run. They're not going.
That's an NFL caliber play.
Yeah.
You're breaking tackles. You have very nice juke moves, 5-star skill moves for Jarryd Hayne. He's running straight up. You can see his explosive speed. Now that doesn't always translate because there are freak athletes in college football that don't become great NFL athletes because of the speed of the game. Yeah. So before we get into the numbers, your thoughts on Jarryd Hayne and what you like about this?
I've got 2 points on this. From a serious standpoint, I know the comment section already is going to set alight the fact is that talking about rugby, the difference between both sports and what sport is more competitive. And the tiresome argument that I would always hear was that rugby was more of a man's sport because they didn't wear pads. Like, you need to take that from two sides, right? Like, when you wear pads, have you felt those pads? Like, I have one of my best friends is now going to France to be an American football player in France, and he's played at this level, and he showed me all the equipment, and I wanted to study it to figure it out. The helmets alone weigh so much weight. So what does that do to a tackle? That gives the person who's delivering the tackle more incentive because they feel like they're not going to be as hurt as much to deliver it. And that's a lot more weight that you're taking on. So I will never make the argument. I'll make the argument all day that football is the best sport in the world, but I will never make an argument, never make the argument that rugby in American football can be compared through masculinity because one doesn't wear pads. Those pads add a devastating blow when you're getting hit. So therefore, you're putting your body just through as much trauma. I'm not going to differentiate between which one is which.
Right.
For me, I prefer watching American football, and I know that might shock a lot of people.
Up top.
It's too many stops, but I like the tactical side that goes into it. Not saying that rugby doesn't have tactical side of it. I mean, I grew up watching rugby. I know what goes into the game. I like the free-flowing mentality of it. There's just an anticipation factor that comes with American football that I like more. I love this story because I love to see a crossover. I take pleasure in watching European athletes come over to the NBA and perform out of their skin. And I'm like, that's great to see that crossover because I don't like the fact that the NFL is exclusive just to Americans or that the NBA is just controlled by Americans. Not because I don't want Americans to win. Same way I want the MLS to do better. It's because I like to see a sport that I think is a good sport become transcendent worldwide. And this is a big factor in helping that because this guy, if he is successful, maybe pave the way for a bunch of rugby players to do it. Not that rugby's not a sport that can hold all these players on their own, but there's an excitement factor of going like, just hearing that someone can do something else that's similar to their already, that suits their athleticism is something that everyone wants to see. Like, I remember even Usain Bolt claimed that he could make Manchester United's team. Ridiculous claim. But it's still like, people are like, oh, this is obviously more respected, but you just think, all right, that'd be interesting to see.
It would have been. And the thing with Jarryd Hayne, too, is that Australia's fan base for him, I mean, he was a beloved player in the National Rugby League, and they're going to bring over an audience probably from Australia who probably will become San Francisco 49er fans. Yeah. He is projected to make the team. That doesn't mean he's going to make the team, but when you watch what he's done in the preseason, which I would almost always say it does not matter.
Yep.
You know, like there's so many players. Example, Reggie Bush shined in the preseason when he was a rookie, and so did many other players in the NFL, just to translate to be awful in the regular season and throughout their careers, and vice versa. There's players that didn't look so good in the preseason who turn into monsters in the regular season. Khalil Mack is a good example of that. Or wasn't flashy in the preseason. So Jarryd Hayne, and speaking on what he's done, 175 rushing yards on 25 carries, which makes him the second leading rusher of all the running backs in preseason football. Granted, you're not playing a full game. Usually you're only getting 5-6 touches throughout each of the games. And these are some pictures you can see from Jarryd Hayne on the 49ers. 7 yards a carry. There is not one NFL team that if you were to put up that numbers, he'd be an MVP candidate. That's 7 yards a carry. I don't think that might have never been seen in the NFL before. But again, it's just preseason numbers. Even more important to him is his dual threat ability. He can be a punt returner or a kick returner, 163 yards on 10 punt returns, 16.3 yards per return. But that's why I highlighted that tape, because when you watch that, you're dodging tackles, you're breaking tackles, and more importantly, you're not out of gas. When you get past that, he turns on the jets immediately after and runs. And just, by the way, look at the sheer size of this guy. So he kind of looks like Russell Wilson, by the way. I have to admit that. He's 6'2", he's 220. And the last picture in this B-roll, which I think is coming up after this one, we got to pause because there's an absolute football move. There's the play I was talking about. The sheer ability. I mean, it's also weird. It must be a transition just to hold a smaller egg for the NFL because, I mean, that's a huge ball. So there's certain things that you do got to worry about when you watch him play. One, like, will you be able to hold on to the football with a helmet hitting him at full speed? Certain things might not translate. You know, carrying a different type of ball together. Maybe he'll struggle with fumbles in the beginning of the year. But the whole point I'm trying to make here is that the 49ers offseason has been brutal. So many retirements and players let go and arrests and DUIs. It was just a nightmare. For a fan base that is one of the most likable teams in football. I mean, this team has won Super Bowls in the Steve Young era, Jerry Rice, amazing players. You lost Jim Harbaugh, you got Jim Tomsula, who, as we've talked about on TYT Sports before, is a person you want to root for. He's a class act coach. And now you have a guy like Jarryd Hayne, who's going to be playing behind, when he makes the team, as I'm hoping he does, Carlos Hyde and Reggie Bush. And Mike Davis, who they drafted. He'd be the fourth running back, but that doesn't mean he couldn't work his way up. I would love to see him right up there with Carlos Hyde, splitting carries at some point in the season, because you want him to succeed.
So there's a couple of things that resonate that I think will translate over well from rugby, is that he's comfortable in the chaos, meaning that the chaotic approach that is in rugby is non-stop. You go from one end, you take a breather, you're going from the other end. So it really depends. There's two ways it could go. He could suddenly get used to, which it seems in preseason. I said you just mentioned that this doesn't always translate, but it seems that it's working for him. That he only needs to use those bursts sparingly. He's got an unbelievable engine, which you have to have in rugby, and that might work for him better because most American football players are expected to exceed themselves in those short bursts and then come back and then breathe and then go again. So he might adapt well to that environment, or he might not be used to it, and maybe sometimes he might not be as quick to react because he's used to just continuously running. So there's two ways I would love to see him take the first point there and use his stamina to his own ability. To the fact is that he's ready to go non-stop because he's used to circulating at an unbelievable pace for how many minutes it is in rugby. Sorry, I don't know exact minutes, but an unbelievable amount of time to keep up that level of intensity. So, and you mentioned carrying the ball. It's a small size ball, and he uses the same, like in rugby, people are tackling you at the same magnitude, but it's not. I think people have more time.
You've
got a helmet coming in, but you've got more time in rugby. You can move the ball side to side, so you're not expected to take it and go straight to the end zone. Whereas in American football, very rare we see people dishing the ball. It has happened. I've studied my American football. They do dish it between each other in rare occasions, which is good. But he's expected to get it. Dish it. They have to do it to the side.
Nice
I
catch.
was trying to throw it to you, and I caught your form as you were throwing it to me. And I am impressing myself with my perspective on this. So you can let me know in the comments whether you like my perspective on this matter.
I hope Jarryd Hayne does well. I'm rooting for him. I'm not rooting for the 49ers. I'm rooting for my New York Giants. But if he were not to make this team, there's got to be an NFL team out there who would sign him because he deserves to be playing on
And if he
some...
does, no, you bet your ass there'll be more NFL scouts, if there isn't already, in Australia,
In the rugby
England,
league, of course.
in rugby league, just trying to get
I
more
mean,
players.
again, in his physical, that was the last point I wanted to make. Colin Kaepernick, who is the San Francisco 49ers quarterback, has called him when he trained with him in April, after he signed. He's just called him, he's a freak athlete. And that's one of those things that you're born with those abilities.
Yeah.
So hopefully he's working at them. Hopefully we see him on the field for the 49ers, splitting carries with Hyde, Bush, maybe Mike Davis, who I know they signed from their draft in 2015 draft.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
still
going
won't beat
for.
my Vikings, though.
Leave your comments in the comment section below. Maybe they'll beat Francis Maxwell's Minnesota Vikings.
Doubt it.
Hopefully they
With
don't.
Adrian Peterson coming back, you bet your ass it's never going to
Oh,
happen.
look at that. He's talking trash already. Like,
Standard.
favorite, subscribe at Francis_Maxwell and at JasonRubin91, and of course at TYT Sports.